Hi everyone. Yeah, so my name is Maria Ritola. I'm really glad to be here today. Actually going to talk about some very personal things. This is a very different talk that I normally deliver when I very often talk about, well, technological progress, how that, affects our societies. What should we do? I talk about some global challenges and have a perspective on these types of themes. But today it's going to be more about, personal reflection and some stories. Actually pulled together 12 stories from my life. And by the way, feel free to ask any questions anytime. Like, this is better the more interactive it becomes. It's not going to be a company presentation at all, but in order for you to understand, these stories, I will also tell something about Iris.ai, the tools we've been building in the past 5 years, where we are at, and so forth. So I look forward to kind of having an interactive session with you. It's going to be a talk actually about growth. It's sometimes really enjoyable, but frankly speaking, quite often pretty painful as well for us humans. And now some might ask, like, why growth? And my answer to that question is that I think it's actually the most important thing for us humans, growing to become the humans, the humans we want to become, doing the things that we really love in life, etc. And then, if somebody is thinking whether I've actually already crossed that finish line, whether I'm already there, it's like absolutely not, definitely. But there are some takeaways from the journey, in the past decades. So it's going to be about 12 stories, and all of them are in one way or another tied to my life. And we're going to start by jumping first to 1998, when I was 15 years old. This is an image from Riikka Salminen's book, 𝘬𝘪𝘵𝘮𝘦𝘴 suomalaistytöistä, jotka muuttivat maailmaa. At this time, when she tried to kind of capture the image, I was 15, and I would have introduced myself as a person who plays violin and plays basketball a lot. So this is me back then. I'm on the 7th grade. I just devoted my life to these two instruments. And I oftentimes back then just found myself thinking how the life would be like if I was, a violin player, a basketball player, violinist. Like, how would that look like? I'd never seen anybody do that. So then I went and asked from my violin teacher Stanislav, his thoughts about it, and he thought it was a really terrible idea. He was thinking that I would break my fingers, kind of combining the two things. And so, but I never quit basketball. I still kept playing. But eventually, when I had played about maybe 12, 13 years, I realized that I'd never, ever actually hurt my fingers in that process. I've always hurt my ankles, but never the fingers. And I actually started to think that my fingers became really strong because I played both of those kind of instruments. So at that point, I've kind of learned to kind of mix the unusual stuff, found the thrill in mixing things that you wouldn't normally fix. Well, I did not become a basketball player, and I did not become a violinist, but this is one of the takeaways from that time. Now, actually later on that very year when I was 15, I got very sick. I got diagnosed with cancer. And so here's actually a little reflection I wrote in my diary when the medication started. It's basically about life, overcoming the disease, and the last sentence is very hopeful, saying that I think I'm gonna win this battle. And I did. And later, as I'm here, as you can see, then kind of a year later, the medication took about 12 months, and then at the end of the medication, when I was coming from the last treatment, I met my doctor, and she gave me a pretty important advice for life. She was telling me that, hey, like, life is way too short to waste on stuff that don't really matter. So just do in life, stuff that matters. So I came to a kind of a crystal clear realization that I had gotten a new chance in life, although life had barely started. I was only 15 at that point. So that's the very first story. This very much has defined my life since. Now moving on, the advice from the doctor, well, I tried to kind of follow that, but I did slip here and there from that path of doing stuff that really matters. About 10 years ago, I was actually working at the United Nations, when I realized that as much as I found the agenda of the United Nations really important, I felt that at that point in my life it wasn't for me. I was just like really wanting to get my hands, dirty, playing with new things, creating new stuff, and still the thought of leaving a really well-paid position, a kind of a good job in a prestigious organization, I found that it stressed me out quite a bit. So when I was packing my stuff in Brooklyn, I was, everything but content. My career had started off pretty well, and I was just kind of leaving it behind and not knowing where I was going at that point. And if there are, actually, I wanted to ask from you at the beginning, are there any students here? Any of you are students? Some of you are researchers, and then some of you employees at Aalto. Yeah. So especially this goes to the students, because I don't know if you've been frustrated about it by kind of thinking about it, but when, for example, choosing a major, I was stressing out that I was, I could choose the major that would 100% give me the secure job. And then the other option was to choose something that I was really intrigued about. I was really intrigued about economics, because I really wanted to understand how these models think that the world works. What are the assumptions behind them? And so I had several discussions with professors and friends about that choice. So it's not really an easy choice to go for the things that you are really excited about, because there's always maybe the fear that you don't get to find the job that actually gives you a monthly salary, etc. So these kinds of things were popping in my mind at that point. Well, I ended up choosing the economics, but I haven't really done anything related to that since I graduated. I was working at the Bank of Finland for a while, but then kind of life showed its own ways, and here I am nowadays, working as an entrepreneur. But at that point, when I was pretty frustrated, a friend of mine gave me actually helped me out quite a bit. She came and asked from me whether I was actually thinking about my career, and when I said yes, she said that, hey, you should stop thinking about that, because when you start thinking about your career, it actually makes you think what you believe others think you should do. You should just really go for what you really want to do and stop thinking about the right career move. So that was the kind of the valuable advice at that point. Then we're kind of approaching the kind of technological progress. So this third story is about progress. I've heard the saying that we are living the most exciting time in human history quite many times in the past few years, and kind of technological progress has been so fast that science fiction is becoming science fact. And the real-time voice translation that quite a bit actually reminds me of how Bubblefish works at the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. How many of you have read that book? So some of you have. So Bubblefish is basically, it's a creature that is placed into a person's ear, and then Bubblefish translates aliens' language to you in real time. So it's not really real-time voice translation, but there are similarities in between the Bubblefish and the actual kind of real-time voice translation applications. So what I'm trying to say is that we're witnessing quite impressive progress at this time. And still, yet, it's really good to remember that these tools, new tools as a concept, they don't actually offer anything new in the sense of, you know, what they are being. Like we humans, what I'm trying to say is that we humans have always been kind of species that creates new tools that actually differentiates us quite fundamentally from other species. And if I give you just a couple of examples, if we kind of jump back in time about 2.6 million years ago, here we actually have the hammer stone. It's a crucially important innovation, and since this time, one of the kind of the truly pivotal innovation that, you know, came after these kinds of things in the Stone Age was basically about 10,000 years ago, and you can see the leap from 2.6 million years to 10,000 years ago. So domestication of plants and the beginning of the Neolithic era. We learned to grow barley, we learned to grow wheat, we learned to grow chickpeas, etc. That was a turning point for kind of the human history. Then 14th century, again jumping quite a long time to 14th century, and I'm not saying that nothing happened in between these times, but like these are some of the really kind of pivotal moments in our human history. So 14th century, only 700 years from today, we have the compass, which is developed by the Chinese, but it enables actually reliable navigation and expeditions of the Europeans and the European domination then afterwards. And now we are already approaching the industrialization, but again, jumping still quite many hundred years forward to the 18th and 19th century and steam engines. Like massive technical transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, they change fundamentally and enable a wide-scale economic development. Now, around this time, it's really interesting as people actually start to understand the value of innovations. So it's around this time that innovation for the first time becomes systematic, and somebody actually starts to exercise it not for personal glory, but to actually gain economic benefits, like economic gains. Now approaching the 20th century, and here we can see that, you know, the jumps are, you know, not that, you know, they're smaller. So we're approaching the 20th century. We get the incandescent lamps. Edison and Swan, they patented the first incandescent lamp about 1880. So the society is no longer dependent on daylight in the way it used to be. And now, 1947, the first transistor, and then the dawn of IT revolution starts to be here. And now we're talking about tens of years. Now that's the crucial thing. Now, 1989, Tim Berners-Lee develops the World Wide Web, and the internet as we know it nowadays is born, although internet was actually developed by DARPA a couple of decades before. But Tim Berners-Lee made it actually, you know, as it is through developing the World Wide Web. And in the early 2000s, we sequenced the first human genome for the first time. In 2000, who of you knows how much it costs actually to sequence the entire human genome about 20 years ago? How much was it? You can guess. Yes, exactly, 100 million. Now it's, do you know that as well? $850. In 5 years' time? $4, $10, $20? We don't know. But like the price curve is amazing. And now approaching today, all these gadgets can just fit in your pocket with a massive storage and better quality. We started off with tools like Hammerstone a couple of million years ago, and it ended up here. With the rate of technological change still accelerating. So the acceleration is the interesting thing here. And yet, the reason why I really wanted to show you all these, you know, things that happened throughout this kind of, you know, this long time period is that we still seem to be confused with all this. At least I have been confused with all of this development. And why is that? It's because of this. Regardless, all of these really impressive developments our inventiveness, like really our ability to do all those things, to kind of give birth to all of these kind of innovations, we still have massive global issues to tackle, like climate change. And now some of us might even ask, like, how is it even possible, knowing that we have all of these tools and we have all of this information around us? So the question was, or is, how can we turn the progress on technological front to progress on the human front? And that's what I'm interested in. That's really what intrigues me. And then going to the next story, back in 2015, I was selected to attend a Singularity University's kind of their course, basically, of 3 months or so. And I went there with the question of like, how can we leverage all of these developments and build something useful to solve some of the kind of most difficult problems of our era? So at the Singularity, and of course this might sound a bit childish even, but your only homework at SU at that time was to affect positively the lives of 1 billion people in 10 years' time. Now, I think, some may say that, that's the kind of the Silicon Valley talk, but at the same time, I actually think that it's really useful to have goals like that, because that challenges your thinking. You're not kind of trying to and wanting to build something that's incremental, but you're actually trying to build something that, aims to solve something big, something in scale. So now afterwards, I think actually that the most important lesson from the Singularity in 2015 came from Kentaro Toyama, where he basically said that we shouldn't believe the hype that technology is never the main driver of social progress. Like the technologies, I think he kind of coined it quite well. Like he said that technologies only amplify the capacities that are already out there. So making impact really requires a deep understanding of the problem and its root causes. Otherwise, you end up kind of just building new problems on top of already existing problems, right? So in terms of education, and this is a very simplified example, kids, for instance, with greater vocabularies, they get more out of content which is online. Now, teachers who are dealing with kids or students with some cognitive challenges, like they won't reach any better results by distributing laptops around the classroom. And we know if a company fails to make profit, it never tries to solve the problem by basically buying new laptops or buying new gadgets or things like that. And yet, this is kind of straightforward when you think about it. But yet, there are quite a few examples from big organizations, big kind of agencies like some of the UN agencies, where they basically elaborate how they've tried to tackle social problems in that way. It's just like buying the technology and trying to kind of implement it, trying to kind of throw it to the problem. Well, you can't do that. You just really need to turn the whole kind of palette around. So that's one of the key kind of takeaways from that time. Now, as I mentioned already, one of the kind of goals of the summer was to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people, and at that point with some of my friends, we sat down and started thinking that, okay, what if we build a tool that enabled researchers to leverage and use all of the existing scientific data more optimally? What would that allow them to do? If they could leverage the existing, research articles that are out there, if they would be able to tap into them, really usefully, optimally benefit from them, what would that allow them to do better? Would it allow them actually to come up with new inventions, come up with new breakthroughs, get some new insights? And we were thinking that, that's most probably the thing that would happen. So that was our motivation then to start off Iris.ai. Yeah. Sorry? Oh yeah, I will tell. Actually, that's a good idea. So at Singularity University, we had 80 participants, and we basically started off new companies there. So our task was to find the people from the group of 80 that we like to work with, and then so I found my my co-founders, 3 co-founders, actually 2 co-founders, and the fourth one we found after the program. And so we got along really well, and yeah, we started to kind of give Iris.ai a good shot. So that's how we got started. And then later on, I will tell you how we've been recruiting team members to Iris after we raised our first round, etc. Yeah. No. Yeah, so we are in 11 countries, and we're about 20 people right now. So that's and I think that's one of the kind of ways for us to get the best people in the world to work with us. But then you need to have the company kind of processes set up really well. If you're not working in the same place, you really need to find the time to work together and make sure that things get done, even though you're not in the same place. Any other questions at this point? So yeah, so going back to the kind of original problem area. So there are actually more than 3,000 research papers published every single day. Yeah, that's a massive amount. That's really great. We have a big data and kind of big scientific kind of stack of research articles. But the problem is that we humans, we cannot really tap into that because we are not great at crunching data. Our brain just cannot read and understand all of that amount. So and yeah, of course we have tools, but if we go, before we actually go there, if you just like think about our capacity to process data, I think this is, who was the person who, yeah, this is Carl Sagan, who wrote this kind of sentence that, you know, if you finish a book every week, you will read a few thousand books in your lifetime, which is about 0.1% of the contents of the greatest libraries. So that's just like showing the scale. But of course we have tools there. There are tools out there, but most of them, actually all of them, to find and use research papers and discover research papers. Most of them work with keywords. And keywords are really great when you know exactly what you're looking for. But when you don't really know what you're looking for, when you're actually starting off a new project, or you're starting a research project that is multidisciplinary, you need to have several different angles covered, then keywords become quite difficult because you need to know exactly the right terms in order to find the right content, and that's the thing. That's the challenge. So we were thinking to build a machine that actually has contextual understanding. And yeah, we were glad to have, well, of course, the research papers. We knew that there were a lot of open access research articles that we can kind of find quite easily, actually, through kind of certain databases. And then, of course, computing power had been kind of growing. And also, when we were at the SU in 2015, at that point, certain methods, kind of certain branches of machine learning had started to show great progress. So we were thinking, actually, this progress can be also used for building Iris. So then we kind of started off, and just before describing you how the tools work, just like a couple of words about building a machine that tries to understand language is quite problematic. It can be quite difficult. And one of the reasons why it's difficult is that language is like it's rarely exact. Like words are arbitrary symbols, and they get their meaning in context. So to master a language, the machine needs to master first the ways in which the words appear together. So yeah, it's complicated. So, but yet we kind of got started, and see, these are just some of the mentions we've had, and actually now we're also, in addition to kind of these, and I will tell you more about that stuff later, but we're also an XPrize top competitor. I cannot say how many teams there are still left, but not that many. So if you know XPrize Foundation, it's a non-profit based in the US. So it's kind of a big AI challenge which the kind of the competition we entered in 2016, and then this spring they're going to make their final decisions. So Iris, yeah. So basically we started building two tools first, which would allow researchers to conduct a literature review much faster compared to the manual process without compromising the quality, and even allowing the researchers to find interesting articles from outside their kind of classic siloed comfort zone. So with Iris, you start with a problem that you write to the tools, which I'll shortly show you. And then you build research maps. Have any of you tried out the tools before? Are there any? Yeah, some. So you type down your problem statement in a couple of hundred words. You paste those into the tool, and then Iris builds you research maps, which you can navigate, you can zoom into. And then afterwards, when you have maybe a couple of thousand articles, you focus. So you use the focus tool to narrow down your reading list to those papers that you actually need for your master's thesis, for instance, if there are some people who are doing their master's thesis still. I'm just thinking if I actually have, I think I have time to kind of show you the tools, but here is just an example of a research question. So you can actually take a research paper abstract and paste it into the tool. But it's really important that the problem is written in natural language, because we want the machine to get the context for the words. So you don't just paste kind of key terms, but you actually kind of find a text and you paste it to the tool. So here you are. You can actually try out the tool. We have a free version. It's quite limited and quite restricted, but you can still use it if you go to the @iris.ai. Oops. Am I able to? All right. Jesus. Here. So you can go to 𝘬𝘪𝘵𝘏.iris.ai, and then once you've signed in, you can start writing your research question here like this. And then once you start writing, there is a box that opens underneath where you can describe your research problem. Then after you've actually written your research problem, and I'm not going to do that here to save some time, so there is the example research question here. I've kind of pasted it here. And then as I click submit, what I get is a research map. So here we have map that is organized actually across different topics. So these topics have actually been trained using a data set of 15 million articles. So they actually represent clusters of words. You can zoom into these topics to find the papers that you're interested in. And I just, let's just check what we have, for example, here. Non-renewable oil-based materials. And it could be, all right, let's just open this one. So here you can open the paper, you can see the relevance score of the paper, you can do things like that. You can find related articles and so forth. And the relevance score tells you how close that particular paper is to the research problem description that you pasted into the tool in the first place. So that's how the focus tool, the exploration tool works. And just let me know if you have any questions about that. This is just a very quick demo. Now going back to, yep, I can talk about that as well. Absolutely, that's a good question. Oh yeah, that is a very good discussion to have. Let's see if I can find. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So the data is for anybody who wants to have the tool without any extra database integrations. It's just the open access and then also some patent databases. But then if you want to have database integrations, we can do those, but then we do those based on, subscriptions. So if you're at the, Aalto University Library and the University Library have subscription to, say, these 5 databases, we can do those integrations and then offer the tool with those integrations to all of the students and researchers. Yeah. Yeah, you can actually, and University of Helsinki is our client, so you have kind of full access to the tool. So here's what happens actually when when we start building the maps. We create a fingerprint of each and every research paper. We do that by first identifying the key terms of the article. This is a fully automated process, so no human intervention is needed at any point. Then once we have the key terms, then we identify the contextual synonyms. So we pick those, identify those, and once the contextual synonyms are there, then we attach also the topic-related information. So here we have the topics. So here, as I said, you can basically train the topics using whatever data set you have. If you have a set of patents, you can train the machine with just those, or you can train it with, for example, these 15 million research papers that we identified across different disciplines. So this is a generic tool. It works with all various different research topics. So we don't really limit ourselves to natural sciences or only to humanities. Also, although with the natural sciences, the machine delivers maybe more accurate results, because kind of social sciences, for instance, are harder because the relation of different concepts they're more ambiguous. So that's why. So we also wanted to kind of test how well this tool works. So we conducted a collaboration with Chalmers University. They had conducted a literature review on autonomous vehicles, which included 12,000 research articles. So we wanted to understand how much faster we can conduct the same kind of literature review without compromising the quality of the results. So this work actually took 3 months by a domain expert. And what we found was that we can do the same work actually it's 80% faster with the same confidence level, which is almost 100%, like 99.8%. What we also found was that if 85% confidence level is fine, then you can do the work in just a couple of days. So this is basically how much you can save time and actually, as a researcher, then focus on some other stuff than finding the right research kind of article list to read. Great. All right. So that's Iris. We'll talk about the business model and such a bit later. But then first, I wanted to talk about the team. So what we found, and these are just some of our teammates. So yeah, what I've kind of understood in the past 5 years is that the team really needs to be the best in the world, and our approach to finding the right talent and finding the great talent is not limiting finding of them to 1 or 2 countries, but we've actually allowed people to come from wherever they want. So that's how we've ended up having researchers in Austria, in France, in Sweden. We've actually had one in Finland. We have our tech office. We have it in Sofia and in Ukraine in Odessa. So so the back-end people we actually only hire in Sofia. So they're actually kind of located in the same place. And then we founders, and the reason why we kind of ended up with this approach is that we want to have and find the right talent, but also we founders, by definition, we met each other at Singularity in 2015. We were all from different countries. So I'm here in Helsinki, Anita is in Norway, Victor, he's Bulgarian, but he's in Sweden, and Jacobo is in Spain. So this was kind of part of our DNA right from the beginning of this journey. And so now we have about 20 people in the team. 4 or 5 in the business team and the rest in the tech team. And there is a research group, and of course then the tech team, the front end and the back end teams. So but it's the finding the right people is the starting point, right? But it's not enough. It's just like the means that the potential is there once you find the right people. But then the really hard part is to find the fruitful way to work together, whether you're in the same country or the same location or not. And the magic doesn't really happen by kind of defining some great uplifting values for your company. That's just like really clear, which is something that companies like to do. But it leads gets you nowhere. So the gist of it is not actually what you say, but it's what you do. So if you claim that your core value is learning, but you show no interest whatsoever to new things that's going on around you, you know what happens then to your teammates, how they start behaving? Well, they stop sharing the interesting stuff as well, because they actually read from your behavior that this is not really important. So yeah, it's not a good sign. And one of my co-founders is just like really, really good at this. He's just like so kind of on a daily basis, just sharing his articles, always interested in, talking about various topics, always kind of willing to do that. And I just so much appreciate that, that kind of quality in him. So, and of course the showing the right example in, all of the areas is really hard, but as a founder, you just really you have to be the person who does that and learn to be the person who does that. Kind of learn to be the person who lives up to the values that have been commonly defined. And then a couple of words about growth mindset. So yeah, if a corporate grows about like 30% a year, that actually can be described a very, very fast growth. But for a startup, that growth is just like really normal. And for an early stage startup, it's on the lower end. So running a startup is just like it's a totally different ball game. And also in kind of startup's life cycle, what I kind of tend to think to kind of share with starting founders is that you can identify pretty much two different phases in the life cycle. So you first need to really fast trying to identify the problem that you're going to solve for your user. And that requires a lot of experimentation. You probably have little to no money. And once you've found that problem, then you build the solution to that, and then you start scaling, and you scale, and you really focus on getting that right. So that's the kind of the second phase. So it's just like basically pretty intense as you always kind of keep running to kind of reach the next goal that you've defined and your investors have defined for you. And I also wanted to say a few words about the investments. So quite many founders, including myself, think that if you don't feel comfortable with the person who could be your potential investor, like having a dinner with that person, then you probably shouldn't take the money from that group, from that company. That's because you will be working a lot with the investor. And if you have the wrong people on board, the work gets just really dull. So you don't want to do that. You want to find the people with whom you are actually willing and happy to spend time with. And that does not only apply to your teammates, but also to investors. Coping with stress. This has been a big topic, not also at Iris.ai, but some other startups and other founders that I know. So this is actually a quote from my violin teacher, and I think it applies quite well to anything in the in life. So this is what he told me always when I was going to perform with my violin, that hey, put your shoulders down and relax a bit, like soften your hands that hold the bow, like don't bite your teeth together. And that's just like a really good general advice for any moment, when you start feeling stressful, you just kind of always remember that. But it doesn't really mean this is only the starting point. In the background, you need to have your priorities right. You need to get your priorities right and define them clearly. And I think that as a founder, your kind of most important task is to make sure that your own head is working. And that means that you have to take care of yourself. You need to rest, you need to exercise, you need to eat. And when things become pretty intense, rather than trying to get stuff done, you just need to take a couple of steps back, because the last thing you want to do is to end up getting a burnout, because that can take at least months, if not years, then to overcome. So you don't want to go into that place. And also kind of trying to find and see any signs in your founders or employees that if they are kind of approaching that point, you kind of just encourage them to really take some time off, so that their health needs to be the number one priority. and also the health of any of the employees or founders' families. Yeah, so there's been situations where some of the people around haven't really seen the light at the end of the tunnel, and then those are the points when you really have to be there for them to kind of encourage them to kind of take some time off. Oh yeah, and then growing the business and the business model. The question came. So this is from 𝘬𝘕𝘦𝘴. She was visiting Helsinki some years ago, and I think she said it really well. Like, when you're starting your company, you find your parade, and you just really need to get in front of it. And what she means by the parade is that, your community, your people, your people who will be using your tools. So you want to co-create the tools with them, and you have to do that in order to understand what their real problems are. So finding your parade and getting in front of it, and this is just like, there is, nothing more valuable to any entrepreneurs than spending time and finding the clients and spending time with them. And yet there are so many different things that you can spend time on that people sometimes tend to forget that it's the clients. It's really the clients. If you don't find your clients, if you don't get those, then you don't have a company. So what we actually did at the beginning at Iris is that when we were trying to kind of identify our business model, was that we organized events called scythons. So we just had our first versions of our tool out, and we wanted to understand how well it works. So we organized 15 or so scythons in different countries, mostly in Europe. So researchers would come to scythons with their own research problems, or they come to the scython and try to solve an organization's research problem. And they spend 1 or 2 days solving that problem using our tools and other tools. And then we would basically measure how many of the papers and how many of the insights actually came from using our tools. So that's what we did at the beginning, in order to kind of get into the game, start understanding who can we sell these tools to. So what we actually do is we sell our tools to university libraries, but that's really not how you get your company scale, because working with libraries is slow. But we want to do that because we are an impact company. So we know that if these tools are not used by researchers and students, a big portion of that impact will not be realized. So that's why we want to work with universities as well. So universities buy yearly licenses, and then we offer the tools for researchers and students. Where the actual real business model comes from is the corporate licenses. So we offer them SaaS model. We offer them licenses which allow their researchers, their R&D team, to use the tools. And now what we've understood is that we actually need to specify the tools for the corporate use, because the corporates really rarely do kind of general, kind of more generic searches. What they want to do is to kind of get real specific insights from their field. So say, for example, chemistry. Then, so what we are doing at the moment is that we're kind of using the core tech we have to kind of build specific tools for specific industries. Yeah. Prioritize around. And that's a really good question. So yeah, so that's why kind of that's why building a company that says that it's actually kind of wants to do good, wants to have an impact. It actually that's a really kind of tough question. That's a really tough choice, because it also means that quite many investors would say that no, we're not going into this, because in the short term it means that you're not maximizing your revenue, because some of your effort is actually focused on something that is not scalable that quick. In the longer term it would, because the longer term goal is to build an AI researcher. What we are kind of aiming to do is to build a set of tools that can be scaled both at the kind of for researchers at universities, as well as easily in the corporate world. What do you mean by mathematical? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's just about the users, and yeah, we've exhausted all of our kind of email lists. We've had amazing network, amazing introductions from various individuals who've given us great leads, so that we've had great conversations and collaborations with both in the university world and then in the corporate side. And now at this moment we're specifying our tools for the chemical industry's needs. So working with chemistry companies and especially their R&D teams. Great. And then kind of just a very final kind of story, because things can get really serious, and if some of you are planning to start your own companies, it's just like, it shouldn't be like that. It's really like life should be considered more like a game. Or a play. That's what I've kind of been thinking more and more in the past couple of years. That although it's tough and you kind of push with your team to get things, your new products launched and getting new clients and things like that, it's still will always be fun, and there should always be the kind of the play aspect to it. So not like trying to do the grind too seriously, kind of biting the teeth together. So that's something that I'm still very much trying to learn personally. So okay, so these were kind of the stories that I wanted to share with you. So if you have any questions, any more questions at this point, feel free to ask. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for the excellent presentation. So going back to the roots, being a freshly graduated student, I'm wondering kind of the possibilities for future impact career. So maybe you could give some tips, hints for young people. Why not everyone here interested in kind of like networking, or you mentioned the Singularity University.
Yes.
These kind of examples on how to grow for a future impact, finding team members or finding existing startups, finding growth.
The excellent thing about these past few years is that I think there are more and more teams to work with also in Helsinki. So 10 years ago there wasn't that many, but there were still, like, I actually worked at Demos Helsinki for 4 years, and kind of during that time I started to kind of figure that I just really want to get to build something and kind of start a tech company. And that's then when I applied to Singularity University. And at the beginning when I graduated, the perspective was more on a macro level, and then at that point I applied to the UN. I was working at the UNICEF. But then, I really quickly realized that I can't be there. It was just really, it's a great organization, but it's hierarchical. So if you're not used to that, which is something that students right from school probably not that often, just kind of realized in the first couple of months that I have to do something completely different. And it was great at that point when then it was Ritola who was visiting New York and told me about the 𝘚𝘪𝘴 that he had just started, and it kind of then later on kind of what happened there and how that became being and how that started attracting people and students and researchers to work around entrepreneurship has been amazing. So I'm pretty sure that at 𝘚𝘪𝘴 and kind of you have different organizations there. Then there's Demos Helsinki for sure that you should go and talk with. So maybe what you could do is actually map out all of the different thinkers, just individuals. Finns are amazing because you can just write an email and they will respond to you. They will gladly sit down with you. So you can map out everybody who works on impact and just go and meet them, and then based on that decide what you want to do. and about SU and applying to Singularity University, the institution has changed quite a bit since 2015. So they don't offer this program anymore, but I don't know if there are similar-ish organizations that you could check out as well. Maybe, I'm not sure if Hyper Island is actually doing something like that in Sweden.
Yeah, thank you. Is it on? Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you mentioned that you have a training as an economist. So can you tell me something about your researcher team? What sort of background educations do they have?
Oh, our researcher team. Yeah, so it's kind of hiring computer scientists to a company has become increasingly difficult because, you know, the big kind of big companies, big giants, Google, Facebook, and so forth, they can offer so competitive prices that it's really, really hard to compete as a startup. But so what our approach has actually been, and it's also really beneficial to us because we are doing research, and for doing research on stuff like what we are trying to build actually requires a background in mathematics or physics. So you have to kind of understand that in order then to kind of be able to kind of build on the research that we've been trying to build. So there was actually in the UK a couple of years ago, there was this program where they invited researchers from all over Europe, from different universities. So the goal was to for mathematicians and physicists to basically allow them to start working in the private sector after having worked as researchers at universities. So we actually found our researchers from there. So they attended the program, and we sent our research problem to this program, and then we saw how amazing these people were, and we just like right after the program hired them into our team. And now we actually have opened positions for researchers, for new researchers. So let's see how this round will go. But yeah, it's not strictly that you have to be strictly computer scientist. And if you're only a computer scientist and you don't have a background in math or physics or such like kind of domains, then it's kind of hard for us to hire for the research team. Yeah.
So I'm listening to your talk and also comparing it with many other talks. So do you agree that for startup you need kind of two things? You need prerequisites. So you need to be basically all these founders of successful startups, they were competitive, they could find a job in usual company. But there was a luck. So how can you comment this luck? How much luck do you need to open a startup, and how to find this luck?
Find the luck.
Random.
Yeah. So how to find the luck to build the startup? I think you just need a lot of iterations, and at some point some stuff works because quite often things don't work. So you just need to thicken your skin for the failures, and then once you have enough iterations, in the end it'll work. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really intrinsic, really my kind of core motivation. So that's the thing, like really what drives me, like what really matters, and then how I what I think about stuff that matters. So kind of this is what I find really meaningful. So that's what drives me, and I think that this way that we are doing this thing is the most optimal one, because if a corporate would be doing this, it probably would become a side project at some point, because something more important, would need to be done beforehand. So as a startup, what we can do is really, really focus on this. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I rather build companies. So let's see when Iris becomes more like a corporate. It actually might be then a corporate that I'd like to be working at. Or I go and build a new company. Who knows? Yeah.
Hello, thank you again for a good presentation and interesting stories. You said that you have studied economy,
Yep.
but you said that you haven't used it a lot.
Mm.
So except for this interaction between human and nice attitude, do you have any like academic knowledge or like scientific knowledge or educational knowledge that you used when you built
Started off
the
this one.
startup?
Yeah, one of my co-founders, she studied entrepreneurship, so maybe she was kind of formally qualified to start the company. But what I really think is that once you kind of start building your company, you will learn, you know, as the company on the go, as the company grows. But actually, I think I mean, like finishing up the master's studies, it's been really useful in many different ways. I mean, learning to kind of see how in one domain the world is perceived, what kind of models are there, why are they there, kind of starting to kind of understand that, okay, so this group of people actually perceive that the world works in this way, and this is just one way of looking at the world. And also I was conducting some meta-analysis not only for my master's thesis, but also when I was working at the Bank of Finland for a while. So we did some literature reviews where I really realized that this is hard work to get the right articles for your study. So kind of understanding the pain of researchers kind of doing all of these and kind of this stuff more or less on a daily basis. So that's something that I brought to the team when we started the company. So we have one of the founders. One of us is we have four. So one of us, the CTO, has a background in computer science, in maths, and so forth. So on the kind of more technical fronts, then one of us is an ex-investment banker. So he's our COO, pretty much focused on getting the processes straight. And then, Anita studied like entrepreneurship, so she's had a couple of companies before. And then I come from a totally different angle. So what's been useful and fruitful in our co-founder team is that our backgrounds are very different, really, really different. So they are complementary in many different ways.
Hi, thanks for inspiring stories. Startup entrepreneurs often and the teams think about the exit already quite early on in this kind of impact context. How does that is that do you have exit in mind, or do you have a let's say a stage when you have solved a big problem as some kind of end? Do you have some kind of endpoint or a stage or phase when you think that you've accomplished and then you move on something else?
It's a really good question. There are two avenues. One is that we grow the company, and then at some point probably we'll hire people that are better than us running the grown company, and it starts to kind of live its own life, growing and becoming an established company focused on building these useful tools for researchers for in whatever domain. So that's one avenue. The other avenue is that we find a great partner where we find that the exit actually makes sense and is meaningful, kind of feels meaningful to us. So so the exit depends on who would be buying the company. 2 years ago, one of the companies that was working on similar stuff compared to us was sold to Facebook's. Mark Zuckerberg and his wife have set. I think it's is it an NGO? But they set some sort of a foundation where they wanted to support important impact kind of initiatives, and so they bought the company, kind of our sister company, so to say. And then so at the beginning it sounded exciting because you would imagine that there are a lot of resources, and what you really need is resources to build what you want to build. But yeah, a couple of years passed, and now we've heard that the people no longer actually work there, so the project has more or less ended, and the employees have been laid off, and yeah, that's the end of that company. So that would be really something that we don't want to end up at. So that's why we want to choose the partners for considering these types of options very carefully.
Any other questions? I guess everything is then crystal clear for everyone.
Awesome. Hey,
Awesome.
thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Guys, give round of applause. Yeah.